Classification and categorization need to be driven by the asset's owners because they are in the best position to understand the value and sensitivity of the asset. In some instances, the owner may delegate the responsibility for classification or categorization, that is, the duty of due care to accomplish the task, of the asset to someone else. However, it is important to understand that even though the owner has delegated the responsibility, the owner will always remain accountable for protecting the value of the asset. Accountability in many legal frameworks remains with the person or organization it is assigned to, and it cannot be delegated. Asset classification and categorization may have some other issues that the organization needs to address. These can be sources of errors leading to information security compromises. Now, let us dive deeper and look at a few of the sources of errors that could lead to information security compromises in more detail, and how we can avoid problems caused by these errors. The human factor in security is often viewed as the weakest link. Arguably, this is denying the organization the most resilient, flexible, and responsive asset when it may need it the most. When discussing classification and categorization, the human error can also impact the entire process. This is the reason it is vital to make clear distinction between different classification and categorization labels, and their associated handling procedures, so that personal judgment will not impair the integrity of the overall security process. To avoid problems caused by the human factor, all assets must be classified and categorized, and all staff that handle those assets need to understand and apply the same classification and categorization schemes. When staff members do not understand complex policies, procedures, and supporting elements, or don't have the skills to handle the assets, they may judge the value of those assets subjectively rather than objectively, which may cause inconsistent classification and categorization, and thus place those assets at greater risk of compromise. Another source of error could be the data owner's limited knowledge and awareness. The owner needs to have the proper knowledge and ability to classify and categorize information assets properly. This requires the data owner to have or be able to tap into 3 critical sets of knowledge, including in-domain, subject matter, knowledge, and experience of the business logic and its use of the information, working knowledge of various security controls, and knowledge of compliance requirements that might apply. When any of these knowledge and skill sets are incomplete, incorrect, or out of date, data owners may be tempted to err on the side of caution or apply a higher sensitivity category or classification to the data than is actually required. This may cause greater efforts to protect assets than is actually required, which may be wasting time, money, and talent to implement and use. The establishment of an asset classification and categorization board or committee with proper membership from important areas of the organization will have the overall corporate perspective of the value of assets and can alleviate and address this problem. Issues with classification also include inconsistent, arbitrary, or capricious classification and categorization determinations. When security determinations of any kind are made in inconsistent ways, this can create the perception that all security policies and procedures are arbitrary and capricious. This inadvertently transforms deliberate, thoughtful governance and processes into rule by whim. Classification and categorization determinations, in particular, can, if made in inconsistent ways, damage the trust and confidence in these processes that all employees, stakeholders, customers, and the organization depend on for their proper function. Inconsistent determination or application of security policies, or any set of policies, should be considered a violation of due care and due diligence. Making such determinations in an arbitrary or spur-of-the-moment way puts both the immediate situation and the longer-term needs of the organization at undue risk. Finally, issues with classification could simply be a result of confusing, unclear, or incomplete labeling of all classified and categorized items. It's important to remember at this point that sensitive information, be it classified, categorized, or both, is what needs protecting. Part of that protection is achieved by restricting the ways in which users can create tangible copies of that information. Traditionally, this required physically labeling, marking, or color coding of removable storage media or devices, and the marking of printed documents to show the classification, categorization, and any special handling needs that dictated for that information. Users have the responsibility to ensure that data is only written to media or devices that are suitably labeled, which warns the next person who might use that media of the presence of sensitive information being present. Systems that can simultaneously store, move, and use multiple levels of classified and categorized information need special processes, people, and software to be able to ensure that these security needs are not compromised. These so-called system-high environments usually require users to manually determine the classification and categorization of new data as they create it, apply the required labeling, and then handle that labeled information in correct ways. Systems can be built to provide additional fields in the data structures and logic to support security enforcement. In many cases, however, it is far too easy to end up with multiple data sets that are incorrectly marked as to their security sensitivities. Email and other online productivity suites are beginning to use keyword scanning, sentiment analysis, and other machine learning techniques to identify information that might have incorrect security labels, but these are not in widespread use yet.